Hello everyone, welcome to our ongoing special coverage of China's political season. I'm Zhanshu live in Beijing. The National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference continue their annual meetings in Beijing. Our focus today is the National People's Congress plenary session at the Great Hall of the People. In about an hour, Zhanshu, the chairman of the Congress's Standing Committee, will deliver his work report. We'll be following that and side events, including exchanges between deputies, ministers, and the media. We'll go live to the Deputies Corridor shortly. It's a chance for the press to speak directly with the NPC deputies. CGTN reporter Cao Bing joins me now from the media center, where journalists will meet the lawmakers via video link. Cao Bing, good morning to you. Give us a preview of today's event.
Hello, Zhanshu. Good morning. Today is going to be a very busy day. In just a few minutes' time, the second Deputies Corridor of this year's NPC National Session will kick off. I think the Deputies Corridor is always a great time for us to hear some real-life Chinese stories of everyday life. So last time in the first Deputies Corridor, I can still recall that one showed how people work to prevent forest fire and protect the ecological environment in a forest in Inner Mongolia, and another showed how a previous iron and steel production site finally became the venue of Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games. So for today's Deputies Corridor, I think we can continue to hear diversified voices from grassroots, entrepreneurs, and professionals. All walks of life will be heard. Actually, the Deputies Corridor is a mechanism that was established in 2018 and has become a highlight of each year's two sessions ever since. At each year's Deputies Corridor, deputies from different backgrounds will present their suggestions and advices to the public. So the Deputies Corridor is always seen as a window to China. We're presenting a comprehensive image here. Meanwhile, this Deputies Corridor is also seen as an embodiment of the vitality of socialist democracy with Chinese characteristics, also the whole process people's democracy, which is not just in form, I should say, but an actual way to support the governance of the country. Back to you, Zhanshu.
That is our Cao Bing live at that media center here in Beijing. Cao Bing, thank you so much. I'm joined in the studio by Professor Xia Lu of the School of Marxism Studies at Renmin University of China and current affairs commentator Einar Tangen. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you so much for coming in. Let's talk about this Deputies Corridor, which is a rather recent innovation and quite frankly, a very popular side event of the two sessions every year. It first started in 2018. A reporter just now talked about her experience watching deputies talk directly to the press last year. Professor Xia, let me start with you. What is the significance of holding this Deputies Corridor?
Well, thank you for the question. Actually, holding the Deputy Corridor actually has at least two aspects of significance. First is to let the people, let the kind of voters to know what the deputies kind of want to propose in the session, in the meeting. And second, let the deputies know that what the people need in the future, and so they can just generate and do some kind of proposition in the meeting.
I mean, the deputies in attendance, Einar, they're not all of them are high-level government officials. A lot of them are people working on the grassroots level. They're workers, they're doctors, they're nurses, they're oil workers. So your take on how this kind of exchange helps people understand what they do at the two sessions?
Well, it's very important to understanding this Chinese idea of whole process democracy, because if you went to the U.S. Senate or a congressman, you'd see a lot of very wealthy people getting together and talking about their concerns about stock markets and things like this. In China, this is really an opportunity for very ordinary people who are assigned the task of trying to figure out what to take the pulse of society, and they're not doing it from afar. As you said, these are housewives, these people, sanitation workers, these are people from every strata of society. So by having them involved in the process, what you do is you create a voice of the people, and this is exactly what China is aiming for.
Professor Xia, here's an interesting question. If you had an opportunity to ask the deputies this year, what would be on top of your mind?
Well, actually, I have been thinking about this question. Imagine if I were kind of there. Well, I would like to ask one of the deputies a question. So what do they think of the whole process democracy? And then what will they kind of do for the, let's say, the practice of the whole process democracy in the future in order to get more people's voice heard by the deputies and advisors in the two sessions?
Also help us understand this concept. Einar mentioned it also, whole process democracy. It's a very Chinese, it's a very unique concept here in China. Can you shed more light on that as well?
Oh yeah. We just had this kind of conversation. The whole process democracy is more of a descriptive kind of analysis of this mechanism and the dynamism of how it works in China, how the democracy works in China. So it does not only involve campaigning or voting or election or this kind of thing. It also involves this kind of political consultation and the supervision and also the management of society, the management of a country, and even to oversight. People kind of choose their deputy to oversight the whole process, kind of the mechanism of things. So it is a whole process rather than a single part of a political kind of a process. So
I think what he said is very important. In the U.S., politicians craft the message to fit what they think the voters will vote for, what they'll support. Whereas in China, it's the exact opposite. The grassroots says, oh, this is what is important to us, and that filters up to the leadership, and that's how a lot of these initiatives are formed. If you're the government, you have to hear the voice of the people, you have to know what they're thinking and what their priorities are. So this is the way they do it. So, in a way, outside of China, people say, "Oh, well, there's no democracy there. There's no voice being heard." But the fact is, actually, China has a system that ensures that all voices from all parts of society are being listened to.
Einar, you would make a great reporter on the scene there if you had a chance. Would you have a question for the deputies this year? What is on your mind?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with my colleague here. I would like them to kind of explain in their own minds the difference between how they see whole process democracy and what happens in other countries. I would love for these deputies, all 3,000 of them, to visit Parliament, to visit the U.S. Congress and watch. I think it would really be eye-opening for them to kind of compare the systems, because there's this belief that there's only one way to do things, and the fact is there are many paths to prosperity, and I think they would get a renewed sense of confidence in their own system if they saw just how difficult it is in other systems.
Yeah, we talked about how the NPC deputies represent people from all walks of life. What do you think are some of the hottest topics this year, Professor Xia, in terms of economic development, in terms of healthcare, the aging population, education?
Well, actually, one of the hottest issues in this year's two sessions would be the economic growth rate, because not only in China but also in the kind of the global kind of world, the economy actually is in the recovery session. So how should the people, or how should the different countries to inspire the economy further grow in the future will be the kind of a difficult but it's a necessary question. So I would like to say that the 3,000 plus representatives here, the deputies here, they pay more attention on the question of how to keep the economy growing and how to make the Chinese kind of economy and the society become healthier and more, let's say, energetic. So this is the hottest question.
Einar, do you agree? Because the economy is a big topic every year, and this year we have the growth target 5.5%. What kind of government support will have to go in to make sure that target is sustained?
Well, fiscal and monetary. I mean, China has a lot more tools in the toolbox. They have direct stimulus. They can get industries working. They can tell people, like with COVID-19, they said, look, we need PPP. So they were able to do it. So China has everything that it's needs. The question is specifically on the economic side, how far are they going to go with fiscal versus monetary, how much support, infrastructure, where that's going to go. Is it going to be green infrastructure, or is it going to be traditional bricks and mortar? But I'm going to disagree just slightly. I think there's equal part in mind, because remember, these are not financial elites. These are people from all walks of life, every part of China. They're also very interested in what China is going to do on the social side. I mean, there's been tremendous progress over these last few years, and in terms of poverty, getting rid of extreme poverty, etc., upgrading the medical system, making sure that people have access to things. So they want to know, is that on the back burner or is that continuing? And you saw that with Xi Jinping's visit to Inner Mongolia. That's very front and center.
Honor, hold that thought. We'll have a lot more to talk about, but right now we're showing our viewers live pictures from the Great Hall of the People, where deputies are getting ready to take questions from the press.
Corridor of the fifth session of the 13th NPC will begin now. We're going to focus on the frontline and primary level. And today we have invited a couple of deputies to meet the press. May I first bring on stage the first batch of 3 deputies.
3位代表分别是中国石油及
The
石化分公司车工高级技师
Chief
王尚典
Engineer from PetroChina's Jinxi branch, Mr. Wang
江西
Shangdian.
省九江市财商区新河
Head
镇
of
党委副书记
Xinhe
郑
Town from Jiujiang City of Jiangxi Province, Mr. Li Hongliang.
山东省德州恒丰集团高级技师
Uh,
王小飞代表
Senior Technician from Hengfeng Group of Shandong Province,
现在请开始提
Ms.
问。
Wang Xiaofei. Now the floor is open for questions.
南区第3排第一位男士提问。
谢谢，我是工人
Thank
日报
you.
的记者。
I'm
我
with
的问题
Workers
是提问
Daily.
给王尚
And
典
my
代表。
question is
铁人
directed
精神感
to
动了
Wang
一代又一代
Shangdian.
的中国人。
We have been
作为一名
inspired by
来自一
the
线的
Iron
石
Man's
油工人代表
spirit for
请问
generations,
如
and
何
you
在
are
本职工作
a
和代表
frontline
与之
worker
中
from
体
the
现新时
petroleum
代的铁人
industry.
精神？谢谢。
In what way do you think we can demonstrate the Iron Man spirit in this new era? Thank you for your question. I'm from the Liaoning delegation. My name is Wang Shangdian. I'm from the PetroChina's Jinxi branch. Well, let me answer your question from my personal story. In 2000, I joined the company and I feel the joy of producing and manufacturing the components. I have practiced my skills, and for 3 consecutive years I have been rated the best worker in my company. And in 2019, I won a national champion. When I was preparing for the championship, I had a work incident. I lost the thumb on my right hand, so I can only transplant the toe from my foot into my thumb. You know what this means? I had a lot of puzzle and confusion. For quite a number of years, that have been going on very well, but I suddenly encountered this work incident. I had a lot of puzzles, but my company and my family members, they have been sticking around me from the very beginning, and no one has given up on me, so I should not give up on myself. After a couple of months of treatment, I went back to my work post. I tried to further enhance my skills, but this new thumb of mine, it cannot feel anything, so that is why I replaced that with my index. So I believe that as long as we preserve and follow a meticulous working spirit, I will be able to excel in whatever I do. I participated in the 4th National Technician Competition and I won the championship. I excelled in this practice and I behaved better than 7 years ago. And I didn't cry when I secured the championship 7 years ago, but during the 4th national competition, I cried into tears, and I proved to all the workers out there that we are just embodying the airman spirit. And after coming back from the national competition, everybody regarded me as the airman without a thumb. I have garnered a lot of accolades and received a lot of awards. And I became a member and a deputy of the 13th National People's Congress. I believe this is a responsibility for me and also for people like me. I submitted some proposals leveraging the incentives from learning. I set up a workshop for innovation. I solved numerous problems, and this also includes some of the joint programs set up by my company and also the learning province. We troubleshooted some of the key issues encountered in our work, and some of those innovative practices have been awarded. In total, they have created an economic revenue of more than 20 million yuan. Rejuvenating learning is one of the important requests by General Secretary Xi Jinping. I believe that the airman spirit will be carried forward for generations to come, and we can contribute enormously to China's security in energy. Thank you very much. Next question, please.
And NPC deputies speaking there at the Deputies Corridor. Gentlemen, this is what we were talking about. Not all of them are high-ranking government officials or business tycoons. This is an oil worker from PetroChina who got very personal with a great personal story there. He lost a finger during a work incident. What he embodies really is the spirit that we would expect from hardworking Chinese people, hardworking Chinese workers. Professor Xia, can I first get your impression on what he has just said?
Well, actually, during his speech, we can say that he was very passionate and he was very enthusiastic in something he has been doing, and he was very proud of his work and his job and his contribution, or his kind of team's contribution to not only a particular enterprises but also for the China's industry. And we also noticed that he comes from northeast China, and this northeast China, Liaoning, was a former base of China's industrialization in early PRC period. And actually, after the in a new era, President Xi Jinping actually did a lot of kind of policies and strategy to remobilize the previous resources to revitalize the base for the China's industrialization. So I can say that this represents the future of China's kind of a development path direction to revitalize some kind of industrialization. So manufacture is still very significant to China's economy. That's my take.
Einar, your thoughts?
Well, I think he was a little nervous, obviously, talking there. But I mean, it's a good story, and it exactly what you said. It illustrates that these are people who are on the front line. I mean, this is a technician. Yes, he's one of the best technicians. He's obviously won the national award. But what he's talking about is overcoming adversity and the support of his family and also his company. Northeast area of China, as they call it, Dongbei, used to lead China in terms of GDP. Now it lags, and there are a lot of policies being developed to make sure that it can once again be on par or ahead or wherever it needs to be in terms of helping China economically. So I think it was very important to have somebody from the Northeast who's talking about the technical things, problem solving, all of these parts which really make up the spirit of China. Remember, China had nothing when it started. You don't have financial reserves, you didn't have export of materials, anything. Everything that's been accomplished has been planning, hard work, determination, overcoming adversity.
Professor, what type of proposals do you think he's in a position to bring up this year? Obviously, it could have to do with Northeast China, with industrial upgrading, with manufacturing, as you mentioned. What do you think is possible here?
Well, and during his speech, I actually noticed that there's a keyword, the technological innovation, and he put a lot of kind of emphasis, and he put a lot of energy and his team to the technological innovation. And actually, this is the kind of one of the key words in the 14th five-year plan and the long-term perspective for the 15 years from 2020 to 2035. And that will also be the next kind of phase of China's development, kind of the key resource that should be mobilized. And we can see that early this year, the government issued some kind of policy and outline to regenerate and kind of vitalize the technological innovation, not only in enterprises but also in higher education institution and some kind of research institute. So maybe in the future, well, that would be the point that should be tackled as the first priority, the technological innovation.
Yes,
I see it a little bit differently. This is a frontline worker. obviously he's going to be concerned about worker safety. And when you start talking about problem solving on that line, what you need are the human resources to do it. The economy that prepares its workers for the future is in a position to take advantage of the future. They're going to win. And China is very aware of it. And I think having somebody like him out there is really a symbol to the rest of China, especially the youth of China, that you can contribute if you're excellent in your work, especially because China's going to need more technicians, robotics, all of these things, repairing the driverless cars of the future, things like this. This is all going to require very, very highly skilled people. So it's not always about university. It's going to be about how you can contribute to your society and make a good living for yourself.
Professor, how does Northeast China right now fit into China's overall economic blueprint? What is the role of that particular region?
First of all, it has potential. I mean, the Northeast region, it has potential for further development because it's not like that. The Northeast, the Northeast region does not have resources, does not have the money, does not have the elite, does not have the human resources. No, it has this kind of.
If you talk about human resources, what we've seen over the past years is that people are flowing out of the region, and you need people for the economic growth there. What is the plan? How does that work with Northeast
the
China?
local government, local governments have already, issued some certain kind of policy, like to introduce some kind of the platform for the creation and the start a business for those kind of elite people. And also, I'm in university, higher education, so I know something about the higher education policy. So all the higher education institutions in Northeast region, they try to, attract the people from other part of China to revitalize and to reintroduce some certain kind of the higher this is the technology thing or other kind of social science this research project to their region to connect the theoretical thing with their practical thing. So that's the kind of one point. And the other thing is that the entire Northeast region also have the pride in their so-called mind. Not only the people but also the enterprises, the state-owned enterprises. So they want to contribute again to the China's economy. So this kind of spirit should be employed as another kind of resources for the future.
Einar, is lackluster maybe the word you would use to describe the status quo of the economy there?
Yeah, it's kind of equivalent to the United States, what we call a Rust Belt. I mean, it led the United States, the Midwest. I lived in the Midwest, so I understand this completely. But then it moves on. Manufacturing goes to the lowest cost place that's possible, and that means, globally things have shifted. And in China, that will happen also. That's what the Belt and Road, rather than fighting progress, China is embracing it. But the issue is that for a long time the state-owned enterprises in the Northeast were the dominant factors there. And state-owned enterprises have served China well, but really 90% of new jobs are small, medium-sized private enterprises. And that is an area where the government is paying particular attention. They want to see people start businesses. Innovation starts with one person and an idea, and then getting a group together. So you're starting to see a lot of incubators, special products. If you have an idea, it passes muster, they'll provide a building, land, resources to try to help you develop that idea. So they want to reverse this kind of brain drain of young people who are coming south for the weather and also opportunity.
Yeah, I appreciate both of your insight. I believe we have another deputy there getting ready to speak. Let's listen in.
3位代表分别是
So for these
湖北
three
省
deputies,
长阳土
the
家族
first
自治
one
县
is
隆平洲镇花坪小学
a
副校长
primary
刘发
school
英代表，
vice principal Liu Faying from
重庆
Tujia
市
Autonomous
谢家湾
County
学
of
校校
Hubei
长
Province,
刘西亚代表，
and also Miss Liu Xia, the principal of Xiejiawan
河北
School in
省张家
Chongqing.
口市桥东区
And
东望
also
山
we
乡
have the
原子
party
合镇
secretary of the
党组书记
Yuanzihe
郭建仁代
village,
表。
Mr. Guo Jianren.
谢谢，现在请开始提
Now
问。
the floor is open for questions.
请北区第二排第二位女士提问。
谢谢。
Thank
我
you.
是总台国广的记者。
With CMG, my question is to Ms. Liu Fayin. So you are using the internet to promote education, and also for people in the rural areas can receive good education. So right now we have resolved the issue for the kids to receive the education. So you have been there for 16 years. Can you share with us some of your stories? What impressed you the most? Thank you for your questions. Good morning, everyone. My name is Liu Fayin. I am a village teacher in the Tuzhou Autonomous County of Hubei Province. In 1991, I decided to become a teacher in one of the villages in Hubei Province. In the rural areas, for the kids, they are not able to receive good education, and they're not getting good access for the food. In order to bring all the kids into the schools, I would like to use my wage to support them. But of course, just depending on myself, I'm not able to support all of this. In 2005, I published a note in the internet, which is widely received from the internet. I could feel the boundless love from the general public. In 2010, with the support of Changyang counties, I established the very first internet website, which is well received by the society. On top of giving education to the kids, for all of my spare time, I would like to provide more education through internet platform to the children. In the past 16 years, even though we have a lot of difficulties, we would like to visit every family of these students. In 128 notebooks, we actually recorded all the funds. We would like to be transparent and provide the education. We will not abusive use of this public fund to support the education. At the end of February of 2020, we also able to raise funds up to 29 million yuan, and also we are able to help over 4,300 people go back to school, among which 1,500 students they are able to get into the college for further education. I'm always touched by all the students. In 2015, Mr. Dai, a retiree from Hubei Province, and he started to provide subsidies to the students. Within 1 month, he able to provide over 230,000 yuan and supported over 20 students. But at that time, he was diagnosed with cancer. He was worried that he could not wait until all the kids graduated. He also wanted to help with the kids for further education. And he also wanted to donate over 2 million yuan to support all of those accident students to proceed further studies. I used to pay a visit to Mr. Dai, and also I signed the agreement with him for the donation fund. Right now, the donation has been distributed to the students. Right now, 98 students are able to receive the fund. Mr. Dai is quite fragile right now. He could not walk without a stick, but still, he always attached great importance to the education in the rural areas. So for one of the students, after she graduated from the universities, he decided to go back to the Longzhou town to become an assistant teacher. And also another student, after work, she decided to continue to provide support for those students who are in need in the rural areas. And also we have many other students, after they graduated, they also gained excellent performance in their work positions and made their own contribution to the nation. They never give up, and also they always stay true to their original aspiration. I think the most proud thing for every one of us is to make contribution to the nation. So my idol is Ms. Zhang Guimei, so I will always bear in mind to serve the party and serve the nation. I will continue to stick to my dream and provide more support to the students who are in the rural areas. Thank you.
Einar, this deputy not too nervous this time. Of course, elementary school teacher, better public speakers and are very, I think she's very in her element. They're talking to the press. She talks about education, and just last year we saw very audacious steps taken to make sure education really is a public good. Off-campus tutoring now banned to make sure that people, parents and teachers focus on what happens on campus, what happens in school, and equal opportunities for every child, no matter what type of families they come from. Einar, can you get your thoughts first on what she just said?
Well, I mean, she's speaking from passion. I mean, this is a woman who's an educator. She's gone the extra step. She just didn't go to school and teach the kids. She saw problems. She needed support, and she went out. Now, what a lot of people might not be familiar with is within China, there's a huge charitable movement. Individuals, she was talking about the gentleman who donated 2 million renminbi. But this is not an uncommon thing. Right now I've seen and been invited to a lot of charity events. Some are supporting libraries, some are supporting music, some are supporting rural education. In addition to that, companies in China are taking a very, very big step in that direction. Huawei, all of these large companies have formed partnerships with different areas, especially local rural areas where there is need. And you also have those areas in the West that have been successful, Zhejiang and etc., they also have partnerships with these smaller townships. And you've seen that in Inner Mongolia, you see that in Xinjiang, and you see it in places like Hubei, where there is a tremendous amount of need. So there's it all, when you talk about whole process democracy, there's also whole process support. It's necessary for everybody to contribute. And what do you see as the results? The kids who benefit from this know that they have a way, this was paying it forward. Somebody believed in them and took the time and effort to support them. And now they're returning that to society. That is something that you cannot underestimate. This is the glue that keeps societies and people together.
Professor Xia, your thoughts?
Well, actually, I noticed that there is a point that this school teacher mentioned that she started up a business, a website. So this is a very important point in our education project, because we need some certain kind of the social enterprises for further kind of for further contribution to the whole education project, because education is significant to the development, not only for the higher level elite preparation, but also for the expansion of the base, expansion for the social, let's say, responsibility. Well, for me, actually, I work in the higher education field. I know that education is significant. Not only if you want to contribute to education, well, the necessary kind of efforts or elements is not only good teacher, not only the better facility, but also better opportunity and the kind of more broad perception on the impact of education for the kind of future. So the Ministry of Education actually in early this year has issued a project, especially on the common prosperity. The common kind of the shared benefits of the education, not only in some certain east and central area, but also in western region in China. So in my opinion, actually this is kind of the contribution for the future, not only for the higher elite, but also for the expansion of the social responsibility.
She also talked about the power of the internet, the power to be connected. When she first asked for help from the internet in 2005, she got an overwhelming response in terms of help that was available. Professor, I do want to talk to you about what the internet can do for education, for school children these days. Obviously, against the backdrop of the pandemic, it's very obvious online learning has made it possible for them to remain in school, to remain educated. But then we're also talking about more equal opportunities for children who live in remote areas. The internet has brought them better teachers. The internet has made sure that they can sometimes have access to better schools, better teachers that are only available in China's first-tier cities. In your experience, in your line of work, how has the internet empowered your students?
Yes, this is a very good question. Actually, the internet, the digitalization of education actually has turned the education less hierarchical and flatter and flatter. So it, make more and more people can have their access to the educational resources. You don't have to go to the real, educational facility. You don't have to really go to the, let's say, the great university to have listened to some certain figures lecture. But if you can just get access to internet, you can, watch the video of the lecture and take notes of the lecture, and you can expand your knowledge. So that's my take. So turn the education less hierarchical and kind of flatter and flatter. More opportunity, more access to the the ordinary people.
Well, will that mean fewer professors? No, we're talking about the good side of what she has in the passion, but she also mentioned something that's very important, and that the wages for teachers are very low. And this is an area where I think the government is going to be paying attention. And as a representative of teachers throughout China, she's going to bring this up. So this is the whole process democracy. Otherwise, people just gloss over it. Well, it's okay. No, but when you have somebody who's speaking with passion, who believes in what she's doing, but can also bring attention to what needs to be done, I think that's very important.
Professor, I know you work in higher education, but have you also been paying attention to the double reduction policy that China introduced last year, where 6 months, half a year into that policy? How well do you think that has worked in terms of lifting the workload on students, lessening the burden, if you will, on students here in China?
Yes, I noticed that because some of my colleagues, they have their children in primary school and the junior high school, and they also complain that their children have a lot of homework to do, that their children do not have spare time.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Professor. Let's go back to the media center where journalists continue with your questions to the attending deputies. Let's take a look.
Thank you. I'm with CGTN. My question is directed to Guo Jianren. Now the Olympic Winter Games has concluded and you're working in Zhangjiakou, and the village that you're working at has achieved the game of hosting Olympic Winter Games. How has the games changed the village? Thank you for your question. My name is Guo Jianren. I come from the beautiful Olympic village in Hebei's Zhangjiakou. The Olympic Winter Games have just concluded. China has fulfilled its commitment to the world. We presented a simple, safe, and fantastic Olympic Winter Games to the world. And Zhangjiakou as a city has also realized its Olympic dream. As a deputy to the National People's Congress, I have witnessed how people in Hebei bear in mind the instructions of General Secretary Xi Jinping. We remembered the instructions of General Secretary Xi Jinping and worked very hard, and I feel very proud of this. I'm a party secretary of a village. I have witnessed the preparation and hosting of Olympic Winter Games. The villagers have been lifted out of poverty, and we entered into a moderately prosperous society. We have green vegetables throughout all seasons. We have a new plantation mechanism in our village that has attracted a huge number of travelers. We are a small village, but last year we attracted more than 10,000 travelers. We are not just environmentally friendly, we also improved the income of villagers. Traditionally, the per capita income was below 5,000, and right now the average has hit 7,000. And some of the villagers, they are earning more than 20,000 yuan a year. So our village is a very good example of how the Winter Olympic Games has benefited China's economy. It's exactly because of the games that we have seen fundamental changes. Traditionally, we were just a faraway village, but right now we have airports and highway and railway stations. All the villagers are making more money. There are more villagers traveling to other places by train and by airplane. We believe that snow and ice-capped mountains and frozen rivers are also invaluable assets. We are more than grateful to General Secretary Xi Jinping and also to the CPC Central Committee. Going forward, we are going to further develop the healthcare industry, modern agriculture, and other modern industries. And this year, we plan to invest more than 100 million RMB to build 3 corridor industries. We're going to build a park for modern agriculture. We're going to carry forward the Olympic spirit and trailblaze in terms of high-quality development. Last but not least, I would like to send out a sincere invitation to all the guests. Thank you.
现在请下一组代表。
Now let's invite the next group of deputies. So for these 3 deputies, so we have the President of Zhejiang Provincial People's Hospital, Mr. Ge Minghua, and Deputy Chief of the Taiyuan City Public Security Bureau, Sanqiao Police Station, Yang Rong, and also the Standing Committee member of the Party Committee of the Deputy General Manager of the China Yizhong Group, Mr. Lu Wenjun. Now the floor is open.
请南区第2排第4位男士提问。
Thank you. My question is to Mr. Ge Minghua with Xinhua News Agency. Since the outbreak of the epidemic, for the medical workers, they are protecting the health of our people. So you are actually retrieved from the front line from the last group. So can you share with us some of your experience in fighting the pandemic? First of all, thank you for your attention and concern for the medical workers. So my name is Ge Minghua. I'm a hospital. I work in the hospital and as a doctor in the Zhejiang Provincial People's Hospital. Right now, the epidemic situation remains complex with the strong leadership of the CPC Central Committee and China's contribution to fight the epidemic impress the world. We always put people as our first priority, and also we demonstrate the strength of China to the world. And for some of the people that always fight at the front line, when there is an outbreak of the epidemic, these people will be engaged to treat the patients, and also they will engage themselves in the nucleic acid testing. It reminds me with the fight in 2021 in Hubei province. At that time, I led a delegation and worked in the CCM areas in Hubei province. And for our medical workers, they enter into the isolated areas and do what they can to treat the patients. After the mission, and some of the medical workers, they decided to stay in the city of Wuhan. And in the end, we come to the Jingyingtan Hospital in Wuhan, where there were many severe patients. And also for our delegation, we actually leave Wuhan as the last group of medical teams, and there's no death during our service. So during our fight against the pandemic, we never feared the difficulties and challenges. Even though right now it is in a routine situation of the epidemic prevention and control, and in the Spring Festival, we found there is an outbreak in one of the city of Zhejiang province, and once again I led a team to work on the nucleic acid testing. We received the instruction on the New Year's Eve, and we immediately formed a team and collect all the medical supplies. And we on average slept only like 3 to 4 hours per day. And especially during the Spring Festival, the weather is very cold, and for NAT sample collectors, they have to wake up very early, and they have to stay in the NAT testing site for many hours. And many people, they feel very cold during the work. However, we expedite our nucleic acid testing capacities and are able to release the results as soon as possible. Just within a few days, we're able to bring normal life back to the local people. And so right now, I think for all of the Chinese residents, they have to remain vigilant. We have to safeguard the achievement that has been hard-won. After I returned from Wuhan city, they asked me why I decided to go to Wuhan. I said, I'm not fighting for my personal interest. I want to serve our people and serve the country. I believe this is the original aspiration for all the medical workers in China. Thank you. Next question, please.
Gentlemen, how about that village official from Hebei province? He is from Zhangjiakou, a city there in Hebei, neighboring the Chinese capital, Beijing. And Zhangjiakou is one of the main competition zones of the Beijing Winter Olympics. We've talked at length about what hosting the Olympics means for people. There he had it. It means that people were lifted out of poverty. Some of his villagers were making as much as 20,000 yuan a year. Not much, but an improvement from how they did in the past. Einar, can I get your take on this very living, very vivid example of the Winter Olympics legacy right there in Zhangjiakou, Hebei?
The reason I'm smiling is because he reminds me of every other village, city official I've ever met. I mean, in the sense that he was like, come to my city. It's a wonderful place. We have great things going on. I mean, local pride, very, very important. And I think this is one of the things that draws people together. Anybody who's watching this anywhere in the world understands local pride. And this is really what he has. And he was touting the accomplishments. I mean, people don't realize less than, in U.S. terms, less than $800 a year. That was the average wage. And this was a very remote place. So when you start talking about poverty reduction and all of these things, this is a place where it's actually happened. And it's part of the national plan. And these people are just happy to be part of it. And they have big plans for the future. And I think that sense of hopefulness going forward, a real contrast to a lot of places outside of China.
Professor, it's safe to assume that this village official did not have as much local pride before the Winter Olympics or before all the preparatory work before the Winter Olympics. Your thoughts on what he has said?
Just now, Mr. Guo said that his villagers actually benefited from the Olympic Winter Games and the Paralympic Games. So that makes me to think that the rural China or the villager from the vast region of rural China, they all want to live in a better situation. They all want to live in a favorable situation, but they need some kind of a certain project. Opportunity for great project that they can get involved, so that they could be integrated into some certain bigger area. So this makes me think of the Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei regional integration. So actually, this is the contribution to the regional integration, and it can maximize the resource of a neighbor province or neighbor, let's say, municipal area. They can share some kind of resources like the transportation, like the good air quality, after the environmental protection, and also improve the basic infrastructure. So everyone wants to live in a better situation. Everyone wants to get rich, and everyone wants to live in a favorable situation. So that can, give them more, hope for the future. So they don't need just, the material kind of. They don't only need the material, let's say, donation. They need the future and the hope for. They need the hope and the perspective for their future. So this is the kind of the take from their story.
Another very important thing is that another very important job for those local officials and village officials is what they can do to prevent their people, their villages, from falling back into poverty. China lifted all of its population out of extreme poverty last year. Going ahead from this year, it's important that people don't fall back into poverty given the uncertainties, the instability in the economic development. In his case, after the Winter Olympics, what he and his colleagues might do is to make sure that people keep coming back for winter sports, right? That'll be a challenge. What will he and his colleagues have to do to make sure that people not only do not fall back into poverty, but their wages increase, that they can live better lives year after year?
Well, Zhangzhou has experienced a real estate boom. You have very high net worth individuals from, especially in this, Tianjin, Beijing area. They are buying houses up there. They use them. Skiing has become all of a sudden, this instant hit. Everybody I talk to says, "Oh, I'm going skiing this weekend," and they have to continue. In order to do that, they have to make sure that the facilities are in place, that the people, the service is there. I mean, it's so much of this is, if I'm going to go back to something, it's got to be of a certain standard. And now China is really kind of expecting more. The old days when they used to say trapdoor, which is approximately about the same. It's not. Doesn't work anymore. People want things to be right. If you're going to have good food, you have to have good lodgings. Things have to be clean. Everything has to be. The transportation has to be worked out. You have to make sure that the logistics are working, and that means resupply. There's so many parts, moving parts that go into creating a great environment. And you see that in America, places like Vail or Chamonix in France. It's just as much about getting on the slopes as it is relaxing afterwards and having a good sleep.
Absolutely. Professor, the Winter Olympics might have fostered a culture, a passion for winter sports, but as Einar was pointing out, the facility simply has to be on par to sustain that passion so it doesn't wear off just after the Winter Olympics and Paralympics. What do you think remains to be the roles, the work, the priorities for these local officials?
Well, local officials, especially the township and the village level officials, well, they are very important, or actually they are very significant in promoting their local development, because three words can describe the previous the mindset of the local people. They are waiting for the help. They are, let's say, relying on the upper apparatus for the resource, and they are asking for all the help. So this kind of the mindset should be avoided, should be, let's say, reduced, because this is a kind of a passive thing. But they need to actively get into the development strategy. So the local official, especially the village level and township level, they need to figure out how in the future they can do to create more opportunity for the local people, local villager to get involved in the development, rather than waiting for and relying on and asking for more resources for them to help. So, well, here is the opportunity for the Olympic. But if you want to wait for another Olympic like the great project, you need to wait for another 4 year or another 5 year. But if you do not grab the instant opportunity, the spirit, the hope, then the better facility could be wasted in the future. So it is due to the officials' kind of mindset to vitalize the local people.
They know what their people need, and they know what they're capable of, and they can't just wait around for another big opportunity to happen. Gentlemen, we've been hearing from the deputies. Let's also hear from people on the streets. CGTN's Wang Mengjie talks with people about their expectations for the political meetings.
It collects proposals from the people. It expresses public opinion. It is China's 2 sessions.
At more recent events, rural revitalization, microeconomic policies, green transformation, COVID-19 prevention and control were among the hottest topics. So what about 2022? What are people expecting from this year's 2 sessions?
The policy to delay retirement. Take me, myself, as an example. I'm working in Beijing, but I've registered my household at my hometown, so I wonder how much social security I can get when I'm retired.
I've paid more attention to trafficking of women. There are tons of news on social media.
The care for the elderly is my concern. Old people's lives in the megacity like Beijing are not easy.
In the case of COVID-19, more people have looked online to share their recommendations. We generated a word cloud from last week's posts on Weibo, a Chinese Twitter-like service. The size of the words represent its frequency being mentioned. People are mainly focused on topics like human trafficking, cyber violence, housing costs, and work overtime among younger generations. The annual sessions also hold the center for global attention as an important window to understand China. We gather most frequently mentioned words by foreign media about this year's 2 sessions and created another word cloud. Most of them are interested in China's economic development and COVID countermeasures. The Bangkok Post is especially interested in China's COVID policy, while Reuters is focused on China's housing market. Predictions of China's GDP target is another key focus area. Over the coming days, the meetings will agree on overall plans and boost the cohesion to make sure targets and goals are adequately met. Wang Mengjie, CGTN, Beijing.
And my colleague Tian Wei was at the Deputies Corridor just now and had the chance to speak with one of the lawmakers. She joins me now from the media center. Wei, just now we saw you pose a question to Mr. Guo, a local official, a village official from Zhangjiakou, who is very proud of the changes his village has witnessed. And he talked about the legacy from the Winter Olympics and what that meant for his fellow villagers. What more can you tell us, Wei?
Yes, it is a very touching story. You know, we have 9 deputies of the National People's Congress speaking at the Deputies Corridor. As you may have noticed, none of them are all from the grassroots level. So every year, this is really an opportunity to hear the real China stories, and also an opportunity to honor those unsung heroes who are very low-key in their daily life, and yet they are contributing every day to the changes of China. You know, many of them are coming from very different walks of life. You have seen the village head that I interviewed, a small village in the Hebei province. There are doctors, teachers, schoolmasters, and workers, and they are trying to illustrate how China is dealing with the challenges not only China faces today, but also the world. For example, poverty, education reform, the transformation of traditional industries, and so on. So, as you said, I did ask the head of a small village of Zhangjiakou of Hebei province. As some of our viewers may know, Zhangjiakou, together with Beijing, co-hosted the 2022 Beijing Winter Games. It is a game many term as confident, self-reliant, and open as well as inclusive when it comes to China's contribution. However, they also transformed the lives of many villagers that Mr. Guo, who I talked to, that were the village that he worked. For example, he told me about the average salary of the workers coming from villagers, coming from 5,000 yuan every year, now reaching 20,000, and they are looking at 60,000 and 70,000 in the next few years. And he told me that it is not just a traditional, agricultural village anymore, because that village has been dealing with poverty, only doing agriculture. But he said he and the villagers together has transformed it into attractive tourist destination. They receive the local tourists as well as those coming from Beijing with a fast train, 50 minutes from Beijing downtown to Zhangjiakou. So a lot of great opportunities for that village. And you may have also noticed that among the 9 deputies speaking today, almost half of them are coming from the half of the sky, so-called, as the Chinese say, women. As we know, the women deputies are playing a greater role in China's National People's Congress, and today is International Women's Day. Certainly their stories have beautifully illustrated how women have been not only contributing, but also bringing innovation and real progress to the Chinese society. So it is a very touching moment. It's really like a moment for journalists like me to touch the soil of China. I hope we'll be able to visit some of these deputies later in the year. And this is a sweet moment as well. Back to you.
Wei, what a vivid example of real changes brought to people. And before we go, let me say a quick happy Women's Day to you, who will be busy reporting on the 2 sessions throughout the day. Wei, thank you so much.
And also to our viewers. Thank you.
Absolutely appreciate that. Thank you. You're now watching our CGTN special coverage of China's important political gathering of the year, the 2 sessions. We'll be right back.
From common prosperity and economic progress to green development and diplomacy, lawmakers and advisors gather for China's annual political sessions to discuss the biggest topics concerning the nation. CGTN takes you inside the two sessions to see how China's political bodies make decisions and set the agenda for the future of the nation. Only on CGTN.
The NPC will soon convene for its second plenary session. On today's agenda, Standing Committee Chairman Zhanshu will deliver his work report to the lawmakers. They then will hear work reports from the Supreme People's Court and from China's top prosecution service, the Supreme People's Procuratorate. These reports will be deliberated upon on Tuesday. Deputies to the National People's Congress are the communication channels between people in their districts and the central lawmaking body. CGTN's Ling Nan met with one of the deputies who's been hearing local concerns that she will deliver to the NPC.
Shanghai is one of the fastest aging cities in China, adding to the urgency that senior care needs to be better addressed.
Shanghai has built up hundreds of elderly care centers to provide meals, exercise and medical checkup services at their community. And there are new challenges for the elderly. With the spread of cell phone payment, many restaurants refuse to accept cash. That's a big problem for the elderly who are not good at using smartphones. The issue was brought to a workshop.
We need to keep the traditional manual ordering option for the old people so they can be served, and cash payment should be kept.
The workshop is organized by Zhu Guoping, a deputy to the current National People's Congress. She's gathering the voices of people from all walks of life to bring them to Chinese lawmakers. One expat working in this area is expressing his problem to her.
We use Alipay. Alipay for Chinese people, you can rent the car, the house, many things. You know, I already have many points, high point, but when I used to set up to go in, now they are asking me Chinese ID card. And we don't have it. We have passport. So can you see? So it's like limitation.
Zhu opened the Pingju studio at Hongqiao Street in 2015. It has become a focal point for grassroots legislation for locals, allowing them to have a say in the lawmaking process throughout the year.
As a deputy, I help local people deal with government departments to solve their problems on a daily basis. If some issues need to be addressed and solved at the legislative level, I will organize workshops to discuss people's concerns and see what suggestions we can make to the NPC.
More than 2,000 NPC deputies like Zhu Guoping are listening to people to represent their interests and including their voices in the law. Ling Nan, CGTN, Shanghai.
Gentlemen, the aging population is another hot topic this year. Subtopics may include delayed retirement, elderly care. What is your focus, Professor Xiang?
Well, actually, I think that's a good signal for China's kind of development. China enters another kind of stage of development because it becomes more and more aging people in the society. So the government and the state needs to, spend much more resources to, taking care of this kind of aging people. So the old people facility should be improved, and not only the government but also some kind of the gray hair industry. The gray hair industry, the social enterprises should also be, encouraged for them to develop in order to facilitate the protection and the preservation of the people. Also, government should take the main or co-responsibility of taking care of old people, because this is not only the spirit of the socialist country but also a continuity of traditional Chinese governing philosophy. We know all this kind of thing in the Chinese traditional classics. So, well, in my opinion, actually, the older people, the aging people, not only needs a better, material life, they need to live in the less stressful situation. So the less stressful situation actually, referring to some kind of spiritual facility. One of my kind of friends' parents, they take part in the saxophone, the saxophone playing the group, and they have a very good, better life, so that my colleague don't have to be answered the question of when to have a baby, when to have another baby, this kind of question. So it's
they're kept busy.
Yeah.
So they don't. Yeah.
It's good for the social harmony, in my opinion. So yeah, that's my take on this?
I see it a little bit differently. Because of the one-child policy, the demographics changed dramatically, and they're trying to get back to a much more normal situation. But one of the results is that you have, 4 grandparents, 2 sets of parents, 8 grandparents, all kind of going down to a pair of children, assuming that they're married. That's a lot of pressure. Now, I think that China's Confucian legacy means that it's the children who are supposed to take responsibility. But given that there were government policies that kind of changed that, I think there is a desire by the government to alleviate the kind of pressure. Because when you're parents and you have your parents and your grandparents and your child, or 3 children as it is, that's a lot of pressure on one point. So they're trying to figure out ways to do that. But I think it does have to involve family. We've tried institutionalizing people in the U.S., putting them in old people's homes and things like this. It has not always been successful, and it does not lead to a better quality of life.
Gentlemen, I do want to take this opportunity as we wait for that work report to happen, Professor, to talk about what is likely to be included in that report, because this is an annual thing. Most likely it will be a review of last year's legislative work and a preview of what will be some of the most important topics on the agenda for the NPC this year. Talk to us about what likely goes into that report.
And I think the report will include at least 2 parts. The first is the general review of last year's achievement in the lawmaking process, the legislation. What kind of laws have been made and what kind of laws have been enforced, and also to evaluate the enforcement of the law. So you are not just making the law; you should enforce the law. You should oversight the process of enforcing the law. So that's the first, the aspect. The second aspect is to say, or to plan, to show the plan for the next year or next couple of years, the legislation and other kind of decision-making things. So I just, wait and see what kind of new laws will be made or will be ratified in the future.
Hunter, what do you look forward to hearing in that report?
Well, there's going to be a lot more emphasis on the social side. We were just talking about elderly issues, but education, there are so many areas. Now remember, people who are unfamiliar with should understand that suggestions come from within government through the representatives, but they go through a process where they go up the chain. People say, yes, this is a good idea, and then they go all the way back down to the grassroots everywhere throughout China. Then if it's a really good idea, it goes back to the top. Then they will do a model, see if it's kind of working, and then they'll start to consider wholesale changes at the national and regional level to put those things in. So a lot of people watching always say, oh, gee, nothing's happening, all right? Why isn't this legislation being passed? This guy suggested it, why aren't they doing something? But that's not how China works. It's very deliberative. It's all about planning. It's all about making sure that whatever is suggested is harmonized.
Gentlemen, in terms of specific legislation, were there particular pieces that you were most impressed with last year? Because 17 new laws were passed last year. In October, the central government held a central conference of work related to the People's Congress. Of course, we also have the NPC approving revisions to Annexes 1 and 2 of Hong Kong's Basic Law, just to name a few highlights from last year's work. Professor Xia, sorry.
Yes, actually, the particular law impressed me a lot is the law about education. Just now we mentioned that the government will decide to pay more attention on the equalization, the fairness of the education, and they also want to reduce the stress of the the junior high students and the primary school students. So this law actually is not only for this term, this period, but also for the longer future, for preparation for China's next generation. Prepare for the revitalization of China's the Chinese nation. So I think that law about education, is critical in last year.
Yeah, each and every one piece of new legislation will have profound impact on the Chinese society. Einar, is there anything that struck a chord with you?
Well, I'm going to go back to what you said about Hong Kong. I mean, this was a huge problem. I mean, right now people like to gloss over the fact that there was a year of complete chaos in Hong Kong, where people were prevented from going about their daily business, they were not safe in the street. You had protesters breaking into shops and trashing them because they didn't like the outlook of the people who owned them. So this kind of constant, what does a government, its first have to do? Its first priority is to provide a safe place. And you've seen that in Hong Kong.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that in just a few moments, but for now, let's take our viewers back to the Great Hall of the People. China's National People's Congress is holding its second plenary meeting of the year. And we understand Chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, Zhanshu, is about to deliver the work report. Now you see China's leadership entering the venue, including Chinese President Xi Jinping, who we just saw in these live pictures. Of course, Zhanshu is about to deliver the work report. We'll be watching together. CGTN will have full coverage of the plenary session and that work report delivered by Mr. Zhanshu. If you're just joining us here on CGTN, you're looking at live pictures coming out of the Great Hall of the People, located in the center of the Chinese capital, Beijing, where two sessions, China's annual political season, is well underway. Today, China's NPC is holding its second plenary meeting. As part of the meeting, the chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, Zhanshu, is about to deliver the work report. We were just talking with our guests here in the studio about that report, including previews and reviews of the legislative work. We'll listen in together.
Deputies, today is March the 8th, International Women's Day. On behalf of the Presidium, I would like to extend holiday greetings and best wishes to all women representatives, members and staff, to women of all ethnic groups and all walks of life in China, and to women of all countries in the world. Deputies, today's plenary meeting has scheduled attendance of 2,951. Today we have actual attendance of 2,761 with 190 absent. The number of actual attendance up to the requirement. Now the Congress begins. There were 3 items on the agenda for today's plenary meeting. Now we come to the first one on the agenda, to deliberate the work report of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. Now I invite Chairman Zhanshu of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress to deliver the report. Fellow deputies, on behalf of the Standing Committee of the 13th National People's Congress, I now present this report on its work for your deliberation. 2021 was a year of milestone significance. The Communist Party of China celebrated the 100th anniversary of its founding and convened the 6th plenary session, and also we summarized the major achievements of the party. We also adopted the 3rd historic resolution of the party. We have won the critical battle against poverty and achieved the first centenary goal. With great initiative, the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core acts in a strong sense of responsibilities and respond to the pandemic rarely seen in the century and achieve new major progress in advancing all areas of the party and the country's endeavors. It encouraged us to forge ahead on the new journey and make greater contribution in the new era. 2021 was also a year of political importance in the history of the People's Congress system. The Party Central Committee held the first ever Central People's Congress Work Conference. General Secretary Xi Jinping gave important speech, providing profound answers to a number of major theoretical and practical issues concerning the development of socialist democracy with Chinese characteristics and the preservation and improvement of People's Congress system in the new era. He also offered a systematic explanation of the important concept of the whole process, people's democracy. Over the past year, under the strong leadership of the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, the NPC Standing Committee remained closely aligned with the Party Central Committee's major decisions and plans, and people's aspiration for a better life, and the need to modernize China's system and capacity for governance. Also, we embark on a new journey to develop China into a modern socialist nation in all aspects. We have conducted the following work. First, we further improve laws relating to the Constitution and safeguarded its supreme legal status, authority, and force. The implementation of the Constitution demands continuous improvement and the development of relevant laws. We enacted the Supervisory Officers Law. We revised the measures for election of deputies from the Chinese People's Liberation Army to the NPC and local People's Congress at or above the county level. We also drafted and conducted 2 rounds of deliberation on amendments to the organic law of local People's Congress at all levels and the local People's Government at all levels. This also be submitted to this session for further deliberation. We strengthen constitutional order and the rule of law in the special administrative regions based on China's constitution and their basic laws to better ensure that the central government exercise over jurisdiction, that the 2 regions enjoy a high degree of autonomy. We revised the Annex 1 and 2 of the Basic Law of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. For the revision of these 2 annexes, abide by the principle of patriots governing Hong Kong, and also suited to Hong Kong's legal status and the realities. For the new election law, make sure that the patriots governing Hong Kong, and it fundamentally promoted that Hong Kong SAR's governance can be based on the general implementation of the policy of one country, 2 systems. And it has initiated a new phase of our support for long-term prosperity and stability in Hong Kong and for Hong Kong's integration into China's overall development. As stipulated in the Constitution, we exercise our authority to interpret the Constitution and oversee its implementation. We also review several administrative regulations, supervisory regulations, altogether 1,291 jurisdictions. We also promote localities to revise the local legislation. and overturned 1,069 regulations and judicial interpretations. We also try our best to overturn some of the illegal laws. Second, prioritizing the overall work of the party and the country, we move faster to formulate the revised laws and to provide legal safeguards for building a modern socialist nation for all aspects. We will serve high-quality development with high-quality legislation. We formulated the Rural Revitalization Promotion Law, revised the Seed Law, and also revised the Scientific and Technological Progress Law. We also made amendments to the Anti-Monopoly Law, and also we are drafting the law in amendment in the future law. We also formulated the stamp tax law. This means we have now formulated laws on 12 out of the current 18 tax laws. And also, we enacted the law on Hainan Free Trade Port. We also issued 4 authorizations to make sure that the rule of law can be implemented thoroughly. And also, we have to enact relevant legislations to ensure security law, the national security. We also enacted the land borders law and also the law on countering foreign sanctions, making sure that we will respond to foreign sanctions, interference, and the long-arm jurisdiction. According to this law, China has the right to take proportional countermeasures in response to any country's acts of any form or under any presence that interfere in China's internal affairs or harm its national interests or the interests of its citizens and organizations, so that we can better safeguard the national security and also protect the legitimate rights of Chinese citizens. To implement Xi Jinping thinking on strengthening the armed forces, we formulated the law on protection of the status, rights, and interests of service persons, revised the military service law and the military facilities protection law, and made a decision on temporarily adjusting the application of certain laws during the reform. We accelerated legislation on ecological conservation, setting a legal red line for protecting natural resources and the environment. We formulated the wetland protection law and also the law on noise pollution. We also enacted laws to protect the black land. We are trying to respond to people's needs and also to address the needs for people's health requirements. We enacted law on medical practitioners and also law on emergency response. We also enacted the law on education. On 2 times, we made amendments on the occupational education law. We formulated the personal information protection law. And also we review a law on telecom and online fraud to safeguard citizens' lawful rights and interests online. We drafted and conducted an initial review of revisions on the law on protection of women's rights and interests. So, in areas such as preventive protection, handling of infringements, assistance measures, etc., we will improve relevant legislation. We improve criminal law and affirm achievements in reform of the judicial system. We formulated the anti-organized crime law and promoted regular institutionalized and lawful action to fight organized crime. Over the past year, we formulated 17 laws, revised 22 laws, and made 10 decisions on legal issues and major issues. And now we are currently reviewing 19 legislative proposals. We rectified 6 bilateral treaties and international conventions. We improved China's socialist legal system in step with the times. We responded to the new development requirement of the party and the countries in the new era. And we translated the party's propositions into the will of the state and the collective action of the people. Third, we exercise more stringent and effective oversight of the lawful performance of the State Council, the National Commission of Supervision, the Supreme People's Court, and the Supreme People's Procuratorate to ensure the full implementation of the Party Central Committee's major decisions and plans. An important principle of the People's Congress system and a basic requirement of its institutional design is that the power of the all state organs and their staff must be subject to oversight and constraints. So we stay committed to exercise our statutory oversight. And also we're focusing on the prominent issues impeding China's economic and social development. Our oversight ensured that laws and regulations were effectively implemented, and all state organs perform their duties and carry out their work within the scope prescribed by the Constitution and laws. And that the administrative, supervisory, adjudicatory, and the procuration powers can be exercised in accordance with the law. We stay committed to exercise appropriate, effective, and law-based oversight. We heard and deliberated 31 reports, carried out inspections on the implementation of 6 laws, conducted 2 special inquiries, launched 7 research projects, and adopted 1 resolution. The NPC Special Committees and the Standing Committee working bodies are responsible for the organization and execution of specific oversight work. This work, focusing on 12 work reports and the 7 research projects, their work facilitated the implementation of the major strategies, tasks, and initiatives of the party and the country. Also, we have to examine and oversight the budgets and the final accounts. We work diligently to ensure that they comply with the requirements to implement proactive fiscal policy. We have to deliberate and hear the reports in relates to all of these policies and the measures. Also, we need to find out all of the illegal and fraudulent practices from the government departments. We have to make sure that all of these fiscal policies can be implemented effectively. Since the beginning of the current NPC term, the Party Central Committee have ensured its new responsibilities and requirements to carry out reform for expanding the focus of the budgetary examination and oversight of the state-owned asset management. We will conduct special investigations into this matter. For the 4th consecutive year, we deliberated the annual comprehensive report and the special report on the management of the state-owned assets. We also move faster to advance online oversight of the state-owned assets. We have covering 4 areas of the state-owned resources management to make sure that there's no damage of the state-owned assets. So also we intensified our oversight on the implementation of the law. In compliance of our statutory duties, acting within our statutory scope of the authority, and following statutory procedures, we conducted inspections into the implementation of laws on an article-by-article basis. We inspected the enterprise bankruptcy law, the traditional Chinese medicine law, the animal husbandry law, the law on the prevention and control of the environmental pollution by solid waste, and the notarization law. We sped up efforts of the supervision of the judicial work to safeguard social fairness and justice. We conduct special investigations and oversight over all public areas. We also hear the report from the Procuratorate and the Supreme Court.
Fourth, we provided support and safeguards for deputies to carry out their duties in accordance with law. This is an important reflection that the deputies are serving as masters of the country. Submitting proposals and suggestions is an important way for deputies to exercise their rights and perform their duties in accordance with the law. During the fourth session of the 13th NPC, 473 proposals put forward by deputies were properly handled. The 265 suggestions that were raised when the NPC was in session were handled. We have actually troubleshooted a number of substantial issues. We also enhanced our connection with deputies. We invited 156 deputies to liaison with primary level deputies, and more than 200 deputies were invited to investigations, drafting, and reviewing and assessment of legislations. More than 300 deputies were invited to participate in law enforcement, in special investigations, in planning, and also in supervision of budgetary work. We also ensured that good support is provided to the deputies, and altogether more than 1,600 deputies have been invited to collective investigations. 6 collective training sessions were organized, attracting more than 5,000 deputies. When the deputies are performing their responsibilities, they are fully representing the interest of the people, and when the people select us as deputies, then we are truly representing the wills of the people. The proposals and suggestions that we submit embodies the wills of the people, and they also reflect the advantages of socialist system in China. It also shows that this system is also quite pragmatic. It's the widest, most real and most effective full process people's democracy. According to the general arrangement of the CPC Central Committee, we have implemented the new amended election law. At present, the new round of election at the county and township level of the People's Congress have been basically completed. Fifth, focusing on the general diplomatic tasks of the country and promote the foreign-related work of the NPC. Following the guidance of Xi Jinping's diplomatic thoughts, we have expanded the work models of the NPC for foreign-related works. A total of 127 bilateral video conferences were held, and we have participated in more than 75 virtual international meetings and 21 international calls and 35 offline physical diplomatic activities, and there are also more than 800 exchanges of diplomatic letters. We are following through the consensus reached by the head of state and deepened high-level exchanges. We engaged in communication with the parliaments of more than 64 countries through 132 friendly platforms. We have deepened our cooperation with parliaments of various countries, and they have reinforced their support to China's stance, enhanced their political mutual trust with us, and promoted substantial cooperation in issues related to Tibet, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, the South China Sea, the COVID-19, as well as human rights. We have clarified China's positions on those issues and fought against subversion and other illegal activities. And we remain committed to fighting any of the activities that aim at subverting the socialist system of China. We actively participate in multilateral parliamentary activities and reached a number of multilateral diplomatic achievements demonstrating the characteristics of China. We put people in the center, and we also advocate the concept of a community of shared future for mankind. We safeguarded the national interest of China and also the safe and just international order. We also enhanced international communication of our work. We have actively advocated the Xi Jinping thought of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and leveraging on the practice of the National People's Congress, we have demonstrated the full process people's democracy. More than 30 primary level deputies have participated in the foreign-related activities of the NPC. They told their stories of exercising state power and serving the interests of the people, and they have truly demonstrated China's past, China's systems, and China's achievements. Sixth, we advanced the whole process people's democracy and intensified self-improvement efforts in line with our fundamental identity. We enhanced theoretical competence. We thoroughly studied, understood, and put into action Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, which is a guiding thought for the party and the country to ensure that the work of the NPC moves forward in the right direction. We also implemented the full process people's democracy in our day-to-day work, such as legislation and supervision and the exercise of the NPC power. We also improved the platforms for people to voice their opinions. A total of 22 primary level legislation liaison points have been established, and we have added 12 of that, covering 2/3 of China's provinces. We also established the link for us to accept legal proposals and legislature pieces through the NPC's official websites. We solicit public opinions, and we have altogether gathered opinions of more than 40,000 people. We are also working actively to advance party building and other related work of the NPC. We are strengthening our disciplines and supervision. We are following the 8-point discipline requirement of the CPC Central Committee, fighting against formalism and bureaucracy. In the meantime, we are engaged in publicity efforts and theoretical researches. We held the 27th National Conference on local level legislation and exchanged ideas and opinions on practices at the local level in terms of legislation. We spread the practice of the NPC in legislation, and we told the great story of people serving as masters of the country. Over the past year, we can summarize our experience with one point, and that is that we have always followed the guiding principle of the Xi Jinping thought of socialism with China's characteristics in a new era, and we safeguarded the position of General Secretary Xi Jinping as the core of the CPC Central Committee, and also the authority of General Secretary, and also the unified and centralized leadership of him as the core of the CPC Central Committee. And we integrated people serving as the masters of the country and governance by the rule of law. The NPC as a mechanism has served the full process people's democracy and ensure that the NPC mechanism can follow the direction of the CPC Central Committee and ensure that the NPC work can follow the correct path defined by the CPC Central Committee. Dear deputies, in the new year, the NPC will continue following the Xi Jinping thought of socialism with Chinese characteristics for the new era, and we will follow through the spirit of the 19th National Congress of the CPC and follow through the principles of two upholds and make new breakthroughs in foreign-related work and also in the day-to-day management of the NPC and truly improve the quality and level of the NPC work. First, we will thoroughly apply the guiding principles of the 6th plenary session of the 19th Party Central Committee and the Central People's Congress work conferences. We will follow through the key tasks of the NPC and focus on key tasks of the country and the party and take the initiative to take up our responsibilities and contribute to high quality development with the work of the NPC in order to ensure a sound environment for social and economic development. We will continue making great contributions after the Chinese National Congress of the CPC, and we will earnestly get engaged with the learning of the consensus of the meeting. Second, we will use a complete set of institutions to ensure the implementation of the Constitution. We will improve the laws and regulations pertaining to the Constitution and summarize the experience and achievements of the Constitution over the past 40 years. And we will continue interpreting the major theories and principles of the Constitution. And third, we will make our legislative work more systematic, integrated, and coordinated. And we have the plan to review 40 legislation pieces, and we will improve the legal system of socialist market economy and also improve our legislation in areas of environmental protection, energy, and finance. In the meantime, we are going to build a legal framework for foreign-related work. When the conditions are mature, we will actively draft new laws to guide social and economic development. Fourth, we will earnestly conduct oversights of the implementation of the law and the work performance. We have plans to conduct 32 supervision programs, and we have the plan to supervise the law on rural rejuvenation and also the law on popularization of science and technology and also the law on protection of foreign investments. In the meantime, we have plans to supervise the law enforcement of the Yangtze River Ecological Preservation Law. And fifth, we will give full play to the role of the NPC deputies. And we will do a good job in the election of the 14th NPC deputies. NPC deputies will be given better participation into the supervision of their powers, and they will also work in close liaison with primary level deputies. And sixth, we will effectively carry out international exchanges, giving top priority to implementing the major diplomatic outcomes achieved by President Xi Jinping. We will step up exchanges with relevant countries and international and regional parliamentary organizations, and we will fully understand the new and changing international landscape. Seventh, we will strengthen our self-improvement in line with the requirement of upholding the fourfold role of Standing Committee. Dear deputies, on a new journey ahead, we must unite more closely around the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, strengthen our four awarenesses, reinforce our four confidences, and do a good job in upholding the two principles. And we will uphold and exercise our powers of legislation, oversight, decision-making, and appointment and removal of officials. And we will endeavor to make new contributions to the victory of socialism with Chinese characteristics in a new era and set the stage for the party's 20th National Congress.
You're looking at live pictures coming out of the Great Hall of the People, where Mr. Zhanshu has just finished delivering a work report. In that work report, he reviewed legislative achievements in the last year and laid out focuses onto this year. Let's talk about this with my studio guests here, Professor Xia Lu and Mr. Einar Tangen. I mean, in numbers, the work report detailed what the NPC had done in the last year. 17 new laws formulated, 22 revised, and they're currently reviewing 19 legislative proposals. What do you think are the most important issues in that report, Professor?
Well, actually, we can see that they are working. The Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, they are working and they are running the country. They are running the legislature. So they are not the rubber stamp like other people say. It's not a kind of a real kind of organization. But their legislature and their law enactment and their law reviewing focus not only on the economic and the social development aspect, they also focus on the national security. They also focus on the basic, let's say, the people's welfare, and also they focus on how to preserve the Constitution's authority. So I would like to say that their legislature kind of work is overall and comprehensive, covering all range of, let's say, aspect of our political life. So, well, I can say that they are doing good, and this kind of standing committees is becoming more and more significant, not only to China's political life, but also to the entire political structure.
Yeah, I know some of the legislative work had almost an immediate impact. We're talking about the law on Hong Kong, reviewing the qualification of election candidates, making sure that only patriots govern the city. That brought almost instant stability to the Hong Kong SAR. That was something you were impressed with last year. Now that after hearing the work report, your thoughts?
Okay, so the legislature is responsible for two things: legislation, and legislation is boring. I hate to say that. Apart from the things we were talking about, some standout issues, it's that laws have to be passed in order to promulgate the ideas, things like that. Minor changes to law, major changes to law. This is not necessarily exciting, but it's the work of government. It's just like a restaurant. All it requires is a million details. You get them all right, and the restaurant is wonderful. And this is literally what the NPC does. And it's all about planning. I mean, it's exhaustive planning. If people understood how many millions of hours goes into each one of these draft laws, the fact that it has to be commented. Earlier on, you saw at Shanghai, they had a foreign gentleman who was commenting on the elderly issues. And this is one of the aspects that people don't understand. When a law is being promulgated, it's commented on throughout China. And it has to go through a mandatory process to do that. It has to go through 2 readings, right? It has to be completely harmonized. So it's a very, very different process. I mean, if this was in the US or Parliament, whoever's giving the speech would be beating their chest about what I did and what I'm the thing and all this thing. No, this was about the focus on China, on having a direction for it and doing all the work necessary to do it. So this is what really impresses me. And I wish people listening to this would understand that this is about lots and lots of hard, laborious work and then harmonizing everything. Because you have all of these different laws. In the US, we have a tremendous problem. We pass one law, but unfortunately it conflicts with another law, or it seems to be going in opposition. They don't clean it up. In China, they do that every single year, and that's what you're seeing here.
All right, gentlemen, do bear with me here on our program. As the NPC Standing Committee report highlights, the formulation of China's law on countering foreign sanctions is one of the committee's major legislative achievements in the past year. Take a listen.
We formulated the law on countering foreign sanctions to improve the legal system for opposing foreign sanctions, interference, and long-arm jurisdiction. According to this law, in order to resolutely defend China's sovereignty, security, and development interests, and resolutely safeguard the lawful rights and the interests of its citizens and organizations, China has the right to take proportional countermeasures in response to any country's acts of any form or under any pretense that interfere in China's internal affairs or harm its national interests of its citizens and organizations.
Let's talk about this law enacted to counter foreign sanctions. What does that say about China's relations with some of the world's biggest economies and biggest powers? And how will this law protect the legitimate rights of the Chinese people, Professor?
I think the essence of this anti-foreign sanction law is to say that all the parties in the international trade, international relations should fully respect their, sovereignty, their national core interest, their kind of sovereignty and their development interest, and to avoid the previous so-called Cold War thought and the Cold War, let's say, perspective. So the countries or the partners in the international community should cooperate with each other, not to conflict with each other, and should avoid the long-arm jurisdiction, because in their own territory they have this kind of sovereignty. In their own territory they have the say to choose their own let's say development paths and how to develop the economy, how to govern the society, and how to organize the government structure. So all these kind of things are all in the spirit of respecting the sovereignty within the territory, and that's the I think that's the essence of the spirit of this anti-foreign sanction law.
Does it prevent or does it counteract, Einar?
Well, the issue here is that China's going through the step of codifying, passing a law that gives the government the power to react to something they see as a threat. So, I think the popular perception outside China is just, you just do whatever you want if you're the leader. No. China is a very, very legalistic society. In order to have these powers, they had to be passed by the legislature. So this is a good example of something that isn't necessarily comport with people's ideas about China, but it's something that they should understand. Of course, China is going to take action. The question is it the will of one person or is it the will of the people? And this is a very, very important part where people have to understand that everything you see here is the idea. It doesn't work perfectly. It wouldn't necessarily work in other countries or other cultures. But for China, this is the best way, and it's delivered 40 years of continuous improvement.
What about the deterrence power of this law? Because whoever wants to impose sanctions on China will know that China will act, as you mentioned, and it will act according to its laws. Will it have a certain amount of deterrence power?
Well, actually, the law, just like Mr. Tangen said, that this is a reflection of the people's will, especially Chinese people's will, that to show the outside world that we should respect and we should have this caution about the sense of sense of the border, sense of the limit. You cannot say anything about each and every country. You cannot, get into the business of other countries. So, well, this is the spirit of this anti-foreign sanction law, and this is to show that China not only has the ability, but also has the potentiality to do some kind of a counter reaction. I mean, this kind of counter, practice to those kind of sanction in the future. Yeah.
I'm sorry to say that I don't think that it will deter other nations, especially the United States. I mean, because it's political there. It has nothing to do with the rationality. If it was rational, Biden would have rolled back the sanctions when he came into office because he campaigned against them. But he lacks the political will to do that. So that gives you a very clear indication that it's emotional, not rational, for a lot of countries. And that's, unfortunately, that kind of, you can't respond rationally to somebody who's irrational.
All right, understood. I believe we have another excerpt from that work report. Let's also take a look at that. The NPC Standing Committee aims to improve China's whole process, people's democracy, in 2022. Here's more on their plans for this year.
We advance the whole process people's democracy in every aspect and throughout the entire process of our legislative oversight and deputy-related work. We improve the NPC's democratic platforms and vehicles through which the general public can express opinions.
Let's talk about this whole process, people's democracy. It seems that it's a concept that's constantly being added on and interpreted and protected now within the legal framework. Professor, your thoughts on this year's legislative work on this?
Yes, actually, President Xi Jinping first mentioned this, the whole process democracy, when he visited in the Shanghai primary kind of community level in 2019. Actually, that site he visited was a kind of liaison office, liaison office of this kind of primary level community to the local people's congresses and to the National People's Congress. So the whole process democracy, the first mention is to show that the people can have their say, can have their opinion heard in the process of lawmaking, the law reviewing and other kind of thing. And also the whole process democracy can be exemplified by another case. Well, that case shows the cooperation between or among the state apparatus, among the legislative body, the executive body, and the jurisdictional body. That's the Yangtze River Economic Belt. So in early 2016, President Xi Jinping also promoted this Yangtze River Economic Belt kind of promotion. Well, after that meeting, the working conference, the judicial body, the executive body, and also the judicial body cooperate together to enact a kind of a comprehensive plan to preserve the Yangtze River Economic Belt. They enact a law and they promulgated some kind of plan, and they even punish those people who go against the law. So that's the good example of the cooperation in the whole process democracy, and that's my take on this point.
Anna, when people come up to you and say, how does the whole process democracy work? Where do I look to see evidence of this whole process democracy and evidence that it actually works? What would be your advice?
Well, my advice is you should be looking at what we're doing today, what's happening today. You've heard, these different delegates speak. You understand, if you've been watching, you understand where they come from. All right, and then most importantly, you should look at the polls. And the international polls done by private entities, Harvard University, Pew, etc. They all show that in the U.S. it's somewhere around 25% of the people believe that the government is doing a good job and is working for them. Whereas in China, on the national level, it's somewhere between the high 80s to 95%. In the end, the voice of the people is whether or not they're satisfied. All right, there is no question that the people's lives have improved over 40 years. Has it been always smooth? No. Can it be always smooth? No. All right. There are always outside issues, internal issues that come up. The question is, do you have a mechanism, a government, that can respond on a continuous basis to the challenges that are presented? So if you're looking for an example of whole process democracy, look at satisfaction of the Chinese people, 40 years of continuous improvement, and that gives you your answer.
The NPC looks at the legal framework among which that is possible, and we do know that the way the NPC work is also being improved, is also being streamlined. It's one of the priorities for this year. For example, election of deputies to the 14th NPC. Professor Xiao, what do you expect will happen there?
And the election of the deputies to the next year's, the 14th National Congress, actually is ongoing because that's a kind of a process to process, level to level. And the township and the county level are actually, direct kind of election. And then the next is the municipal, provincial, and the national, they are indirect election. So this kind of electing the deputy process is also a good example of the combination of direct democracy and indirect democracy. And people can know their candidate. People can even criticize their candidate. People, can say that, okay, your plan is not that satisfied to me because, I hope you can do another kind of thing. So during this campaign and the voting and the electing process, people know, the ordinary people know what they will do and who they will, elect to the National People Congress or the Provincial People Congress. So this kind of process, just integrate people's voice into, how they should fulfill their task as deputies to the next, National People Congress. Yeah.
Lower level NPC deputies at the grassroots level are elected directly by the people, then higher levels are elected by those from a lower level. Anna, how has that worked for China, this election of the NPC deputies?
Well, obviously it has worked, otherwise you wouldn't have the progress that you have. But there's something that is very different. I've attended different elections at the very grassroots all around China. It was for a documentary just exploring how things are developing. And what was interesting is that people really wanted, at the local level, they want to know your character. Your character is almost more important than anything that you say. Because unless you're trustworthy and they know that you're willing to work for the good of the people, they're not interested. And that time and time again, that's why they don't have political campaigns where they'll say, well, I'll put a chicken in every pot, and some other guy says, I'll put 2 chickens in every pot. That is not a thing. It's really run on character of the person there, and then based on their ability to actually perform. It's not just, oh, he's a good guy or a great woman. It has to be, were they able to advance what was necessary at a village or town or city level? And then those are the people who indirectly electing the next level. And we have that in the United States with the Electoral College and things like this. So it's not something that is completely foreign.
All right, gentlemen, appreciate your expertise. I'll come back to you later. Let's now talk to CGTN reporter Cao Bing again. She's following the events at the Media Center in Beijing. Cao Bing, first walk us through some highlights of Li Zhanshu's work report.
Hello, Zhongshi. Here I want to summarize it into 3 key words. The first one is it is really close into people's livelihood. It's really into the grassroots. And secondly, it shows that we are making progress in the work over last year. And thirdly is we are maintaining a great momentum. Let's come to the first point, that this report shows that our work is really going into grassroots. During the report, Li Zhanshu has said that China has the National Standing Committee of NPC has made anti-organized crime law formulated to fight organized crime and root out criminal gangs. And he also said committee ratified 6 bilateral treaties and international conventions. These all shows that these measures, these works are all related to people's livelihood. And secondly, we are actually making progress. Let me give you some examples. That the committee deliberated first ever special report on state-owned natural resources assessment management, and also support and security provided for deputies are carrying out. And thirdly, we can see that we are also maintaining a great momentum for the work into the next year. That committee has advanced whole process people's democracy and stands firm in protecting China's national interest and preserve fair and just international order. So basically, these are the messages from the report made by Li Zhanshu, the chairman of the Standing Committee of NPC. Back to you, Zhongshi.
All right, that is CGTN's Cao Bing with a review of that report delivered by Mr. Li Zhanshu. Cao Bing, thank you. You're watching our special coverage of China's important political gathering of the year, the 2 sessions. We'll be right back after this.
From common prosperity and economic progress to green development and diplomacy, lawmakers and advisors gather for China's annual political sessions to discuss the biggest topics concerning the nation. CGTN takes you inside the two sessions to see how China's political bodies make decisions and set the agenda for the future of the nation. Only on CGTN.
Welcome back, and now let's review the work of the NPC and its Central Committee during the past year. In 2021, lawmakers passed 17 new laws and amended 22 existing laws. They also deliberated on 31 reports and inspected the enforcement of 6 laws. They carried out 2 special inquiries.
Last Friday, spokesperson Zhang Yesui told the media that while speeding up legislation, more attention has to be paid to improving the quality of legislation and the social effects of legislation. He said the focus last year was on key areas, emerging fields, and foreign-related fields. The spokesperson talked about the changes in laws regarding Hong Kong. Zhang said the main purpose was to ensure long-lasting stability in the region.
We have mainly revised Annex 1 and 2 to the Basic Law of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region to put in place a democratic electoral system that suits Hong Kong's legal status in actual circumstances, to ensure the sound implementation of one country and two systems in the long run.
Another highlight was promoting high-quality development. The NPC and its Central Committee formulated the Hainan Free Trade Port Law. New laws cover a range of high-level opening up measures. These include low tax rates, zero tariffs, and a refined and simpler tax system, as well as nurturing the business climate and facilitating investments and free trade. Lawmakers also passed the Rural Revitalization Promotion Law. The move aims to speed up the development of rural areas while maintaining environmental protection measures. Some of these key measures include investing in educating more people in agricultural work. The law also outlines farmer relocation and an ecological compensation system. China also passed the Anti-Foreign Sanctions Law. The spokesperson said that the law is a defensive measure to counter containment and oppression, and is essentially different from the unilateral sanctions pursued by some countries. China also passed the Personal Information Protection Law. It clearly states that buying, selling, and revealing people's personal information without their consent is illegal. Other laws cover national land boundaries, data security, food waste, and noise pollution.
Chinese lawmakers deliberated a draft law aimed at protecting women's rights and interests last year. It's the latest revision to legislation, which initially came into being about 30 years ago. CGTN's Gao Wang has more.
Ending discrimination and giving women a better sense of security, what authorities said were their main goals when they revised a 30-year law on the protection of women's rights and interests. The draft was submitted to the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, China's top legislature, in December last year.
After the draft revision came out, many articles have greatly changed, and there is also room for revision. There are more than 400,000 comments on the website, showing that many are concerned about the revision.
The revision deals with a range of issues such as sexual harassment and gender equality in education and employment. These are the primary concerns for many women today.
I hope that our country can introduce regulations in protecting women's rights and interests, especially in employment. Marriage and childbirth may affect work, but I think it's necessary in a woman's life. I hope that employers and the government can give more care to women in this regard.
I certainly hope that the government can provide better protection for women in terms of looking for a job, maternity leave, and pregnancy-related benefits. I think that only when everyone's welfare is better protected can people have the confidence to fulfill the country's cause, such as having 3 children. And to better promote gender equality in workplace, one expert believes enterprises should be supervised under certain laws or regulations.
Enterprises shouldn't use gender as an employment criterion, nor as a hidden condition in actual operation. A supervision mechanism should be set up inside or outside the enterprise.
Besides eliminating discrimination in employment, some just want to feel safe and sound in public places and believe stronger regulations need to be put in place.
For issues concerning women's rights and safety, especially in terms of sexual harassment, the government should increase relevant punishments and then have a better guarantees for the safety of women.
Enacted about 30 years ago, experts say the law has improved the protection of women's rights and interests in many aspects. But due to the fast-paced social and economic development in China, they say the law needs to be looked at again to account for modern issues. Gang, CGTN, Beijing.
Gentlemen, today is International Women's Day. Half of the newsroom is busy working on a day that honors our women colleagues. About a quarter of the deputies at this year's session are women. Professor Xia, let me start with you. How do you see their participation in political affairs? Are you satisfied with their representation?
Yes, of course. According to Chairman Mao, the women actually support half of the sky. Actually, this is a very kind of a famous kind of saying that every Chinese know. So that shows the significance of women's contribution not only in domestic, let's say, issue, but also in their specialized kind of issue. They can work just like the kind of the male do, and they can also they have to take care of the children. They have to take care of the older people, the aging people. So they actually made larger contribution to the entire society than, I would like to say, the male, the community. Yeah, I would say.
Well, you're not getting any points with the guys. Your wife will love it, though.
Thank you very much.
No, I mean, this, as you said, there's only one quarter. Whole process democracy is about making sure that every constituency is represented and that their viewpoints are done. I mean, a lot of what's happening today in the sensitivity and part of what we're talking about is not only because it's International Women's Day, but China was collectively horrified by an incident in which a woman had been literally chained up and had been trafficked at an early age and things like that. So there's an increased sensitivity. But people have to understand, this is so rare. And the reaction by the Chinese people was so strong. And people are saying, I don't care if it's just one instance, it can never happen. So you're starting to see people say, look, we have to pay attention to every level and every individual. And that was the hallmark of the poverty reduction plan. It was not, a generalized fit every person into a circle or a square. It was all about going literally door to door, family to family, figuring out what the situation was and answering it. And so, this process has worked for China. It's not something that's always going to work in other countries, but it certainly blazes the way in terms of addressing the needs of a society and the concerns of a society.
Very objectively, China has been doing very well with equal opportunities at workplaces for women. I mean, you have all these foreign countries having a problem with China on so many different levels, but when it comes to women's rights at work, equal opportunities with their male colleagues, China has always had a good record on that front. But in terms of further protection and address issues like trafficking, what more can be done? Professor?
The society, actually, the social circumstances should show more respect, should show more concern to the overall situation, general situation of many kind of women's living condition or working condition. So they are living in an unfavorable situation. So people should pay more attention not only to those kind of highlighting people, but also to those kind of living unfavorable. So the society should show respect, should show the concern, and we couldn't be just like waiting, for the government to do something. We actually should get involved actively to do what we can to show our concern. That's my take on this thing.
Anna, I know you wanted to weigh in, but I have a reporter on standby. Let me get to her first. CGTN's Haobing joins me again from the media center. She's been following the events there in Beijing. Haobing, heads of government departments will meet the press shortly at the Ministerial Corridor. We're waiting for that to happen to hear from those ministers. What are some of the key issues journalists are expected to raise with these officials today?
Of course, Zhanshu. Coming up next is the Ministers' Corridor. This is the second such event at this year's two sessions. Journalists at the media center can field questions on various issues concerning Chinese policies and people's livelihoods. The questions are straightforward, I should say, and the answers from the ministers are direct to the point. Last year, when asked about China's lack of competence in innovation in key areas, the Minister of Science and Technology acknowledged that China at that time was not relatively strong in basic research, but a better research mechanism was being built and the team was constantly improving. Now 1 year has passed. It will be interesting to find out how has this been realized. And meanwhile, the government has laid out its plan to continue support for scientific and technological innovation and high-quality development this year in its work report. What specific measures will likely be taken? The ministers are expected to address such topics. Meanwhile, in China's foreign trade, the work report reiterated China's commitment to pursue high-quality opening up, high-level opening up, and promote stable growth for trade and investment. Journalists will keep an ear out of what the ministers have to say. Back to you, Zhongshi.
All right, CGTN's Hao Bing at the media center. We're looking forward to what the ministers have to say this year. That'll happen in about 40 minutes time. Make sure you do stay with us here on CGTN. The Ministers' Corridor will open shortly in the Great Hall of the People. The heads of various government departments will meet the president, take questions on priority issues. CGTN will bring you live updates when that happens. But for now, let's take a look at some of the news stories making global headlines this hour. All right, the third round of peace talks between delegations from